The United States really ought to get out of the United Nations, and it ought to get the United Nations out of the United States, out of its headquarters in New York City. Next month, the United Nations is expected to take up, to implement, and maybe even finalize a proposal for an international world arms trade treaty. Now, this is presented as a way to try to cut down on the transfer of arms between hostile peoples in an attempt to save lives, to reduce violence throughout the world, and so on and so forth. However, what it really is an attempt to do an end run around the Second Amendment individual right of law-abiding American citizens to keep and bear arms. The people in the United States and throughout the world who would like to see American citizens disarmed have been unsuccessful in their attempts to do this through political means in the United States. So they've hit upon using the international body of the United Nations and other international bodies to try to achieve their same purpose. What they would like to do is institute world gun control overall organization which would encourage member states, including the United States, to adopt regulations regarding the transfer of firearms and ammunition under the auspices of general arms control. Now, this may all sound very good to certain people, but the fact of the matter is that what this would do in the long run is enable internationalists to argue that the United States is not complying with this international organization, the purpose of which is to limit, if not eliminate altogether, the ability of people to acquire the small arms and the ammunition they need to defend themselves, their lives, and their loved ones in general. So even though it's presented as a way to cut down on violence throughout the world, it really is an attempt to make it easier for the perpetrators of violence, especially government perpetrators of violence, to do harm to citizens in the United States and throughout the world. In other words, it's a big lie. Also, along the big lie generalities of the United Nations, we had recently the Secretary General of the United Nations call for a demand that the United Nations demand that member states provide for abortion of all teenage girls if they wanted it. This followed last year's pronouncement by the expert on health, the so-called expert on health, that member states provide abortion services, that member states be required to provide abortion services for women throughout the world. Now, these people are going to argue that the reason they're promoting the mandatory abortion throughout the world is so that people will be able to lead a better, more fruitful life. However, what could be more detrimental to the leading of a good and fruitful life than the murder of life itself? Again, we have here the perpetrators of the big lie, people arguing that they are in favor of a good life at the same time they are promoting the murder of life itself. So what we have here with regard to the firearms matter and with regard to the abortion matter is perpetrators of the big lie. People who support the United Nations and who are part of the United Nations arguing that they are trying to do good, while in fact they are trying to do evil. They are trying to undermine life. They are trying to undermine the right to life itself. They are trying to undermine the right of citizens in the United States and throughout the world to acquire the means necessary to defend life should the occasion arise, or should the situation necessitate such an action. These are good, solid reasons for getting the United Nations out of the United States and getting the United States out of the United Nations. The United Nations, despite the plaudits that are provided for it by various people throughout the world, including probably well-meaning churchmen throughout the world, is that it's a great international organization. It will lead to peace among people, etc., etc., etc. The fact of the matter is, the people who are promoting the United Nations, who are promoting the activities of the United Nations, really are promoting the program of the father of lies, their father. They are not promoting the culture of life. They are promoting, in effect, what Blessed John Paul referred to as the culture of death, in order for the United States and for well-meaning people throughout the world, including churchmen, including bishops of the Catholic Church and other churches, is to realize that the United Nations is not a good organization. The United Nations is a bad organization, perpetrating the thoughts and the motivations and the desires of the father of lies. The United States should get out of the United Nations. The Catholic Church should not support the United Nations and its policies because it is directly contrary to the interests of the Catholic Church, and especially to the commands of our founder, the Lord Jesus Christ.